This is Alpha. Let's continue with the previous issue. What tricks is Trump going to play with his tariff policy? Documentation and review of U.S. tariff policy. All the analyses above share such an assumption. Trump's tariff policy is not a matter of thought. His team has a clear economic route and policy purpose. If this is not recognized, then I am sorry that the following content will continue to waste your time. Let's start with the beginning of Trump's tariff policy. Part 1: Tariff policy for Trump's first term. From January 2017 to January 2021. 1 year after taking office on January 22, 2018, Trump signed the executive order. A 30% tariff on imported solar panels and a 20% to 50% tariff on washing machines. The tariffs went into effect on February 7, 2018, and cover approximately $5 billion in imported goods. Among them, solar panels are targeted at manufacturers in China and Southeast Asia, while washing machines are mainly affecting Korea. The policy was followed by mixed reactions within the United States, with the Solar Energy Industry Association warning that the tariffs would result in the loss of 50,000 to 100,000 jobs. Now appliance maker Whirlpool backs the move, saying it protects U.S. production. Internationally, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce has expressed strong disapproval. South Korea's Samsung and LG, however, announced that they would build factories in the United States to circumvent tariffs. Trump's tariff policy, which opened up on solar panels and home appliances, can be said to be a small test. The effect is not bad, and it has not caused much backlash from the target countries. On March 8, 2018, Trump announced a 25% tariff increase on steel imported by the world and a 10% tariff increase on aluminum, on the grounds that imported steel and aluminum threatened U.S. security. Within the U.S., shares of U.S. steel rose 15%, with the Association of Automobile Manufacturers warning that the cost of cars will rise. External reaction: Canada said this was unacceptable and the EU threatened to retaliate. There is a detail in the implementation of this policy. The initial tariffs covered about $43 billion in goods. Canada, Mexico and the European Union were granted temporary tariff exemptions, but were later re-included in the levy after negotiations failed. And the Australian Prime Minister got Australian goods exempted by lobbying Trump. On July 6, 2018, the White House announced that it would increase tariffs by 25% on $34 billion of Chinese goods due to China's support for property theft, mainly for technology products such as semiconductor machinery. According to U.S. Customs data, in 2017, the year before that, China's exports to the United States were probably $505.6 billion. The reactions of all parties since then are as follows. Trump said, "China robbed us of $300 billion. Some U.S. chambers warned of risks in the product's supply chain, and China retaliated on the same day, imposing a 25% equivalent tariff on an equivalent $34 billion of U.S. commodity soybeans and cars. The large-scale Sino-U.S. trade war has officially begun." On August 23, 2018, the United States increased tariffs on Chinese goods by $16 billion, and China retaliated simultaneously. Next, on September 24, the United States continued to impose 10% tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods. This part of the tariff was raised to 25% in the following months, which includes consumer goods such as furniture, home appliances. And in the last year, the United States imported such goods from China was approximately $210 billion. At this point in the trade war, the two sides reacted as follows. Within the U.S., the Retailers Association said the prices of goods would rise by 5% to 10%. Trump said China would give in. China's countermeasures have imposed tariffs of 5% to 10% on $60 billion in U.S. goods, including agricultural and chemicals. From this figure, it seems that China is no longer able to make a reciprocal countermeasure with amounts. To this point, Trump has raised taxes on $250 billion of Chinese goods, accounting for half of China's total exports to the United States. The amount of Chinese retaliation reached $110 billion, which is equivalent to less than half of the amount of U.S. tax increases on China. The tariff war between China and the U.S. is the fiercest bilateral confrontation since Trump swung the tariff stick. The amount involved is huge. Both sides threw off their arms to fight, either of them admitted. However, due to China's huge trade surplus, the actual lethality of the policies of both sides and the leverage of the policies are seriously unequal. The time came on May 30, 2015, and Trump tweeted again, threatening to increase tariffs by 5% on all Mexican goods, planning to increase them to 25% month by month, demanding that the plan to stop illegal immigration take effect on June 10. This information feels familiar to us. One figure is 25%. One reason is to stop illegal immigration. This content looks exactly like the 2025 policy for Mexico. The president on Mexico's side expressed dissatisfaction at first, but on June 7, Mexico promised to strengthen border controls, at which time Trump lifted tariffs. Mexico's exports to the United States in 2018 were probably $350 billion, and if a 5% tariff was imposed on all goods in accordance with the policy, the impact would be huge. This tariff was not implemented due to a timely compromise by Mexico. On December 22, 2019, Trump announced the restoration of tariffs on 25% steel and 10% aluminum in Brazil and Argentina. The rationale is currency manipulation. Next, the Brazilian president claimed that this was an accident. After an interview with the media, he said, "I don't think this is revenge. I will call him and then he will not punish us. I am almost entirely sure that he will listen to me." Argentina's production minister said, "Trump's decision comes without warning and he is also seeking contact with U.S. officials." Trump first announced the imposition of monopolistic tariffs on Brazil and Argentina back in March 2018. But the tariffs have not been implemented because he gave these two countries almost permanent immunity. This time is no exception. On December 20, Trump rescinded this tariff decision. The time came on January 15, 2020. After a fierce trade war, China and the United States began to sit down and negotiate. Trump signed the first phase of a deal with China, in which China pledged to buy $200 billion in U.S. goods, and the U.S. suspended tariff increases on an extra $300 billion in Chinese goods, keeping tariffs on top of the previous $250 billion in goods. Trump went on to claim that this was a historic victory. Economists, meanwhile, have questioned the performance of China's trade agreement, which completed only 57% of its procurement target in 2020, about $114 billion. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said, "This is a mutually beneficial and win-win result." Let's summarize the data from Trump's first term as follows. Tariffs increased from $34.6 billion in 2017 to $70.8 billion in 2019, doubling tariff revenue, according to the U.S. Budget Office. Brookings Institution research shows that consumers in the United States bear 80% to 90% of the tariff costs, while exporters, for example, Chinese companies bear slightly smaller costs, about $5 billion to $10 billion per year. In the second part, let's take a look at how the Biden administration plays. January 20, 2021 to January 20, 2025. Compared to the richness of the Trump administration's tariff policy, the Biden administration is lackluster. During his term in office, Biden retained Trump's $250 billion in commodity tariffs, or 20% to 25%, on China. In October 2021, Biden suspended the imposition of tariffs on the EU and changed them to a quota system, which came into effect on January 1, 2022. Japanese steel was also exempted from quotas in March 2022, and Biden called the policy a strategic adjustment. Within the United States, the relevant industries welcomed it. Internationally, the EU president called this a signal of cooperation. China has not adjusted the previous retaliatory tariffs, and everyone is safe. The Biden administration imposed tariffs on Russian aluminum in 2023 due to the war in Ukraine, but on a smaller scale. In the final year of Biden's term, Biden says he will protect U.S. industries, announcing tax hikes on $18 billion of Chinese goods, including 100% tax on electric vehicles, 50% solar cells, 25% steel and aluminum. China's exports of such goods to the United States in 2023 are probably $20 billion. China's Commerce Ministry said it firmly opposed the imposition of a 15% tariff on U.S. agricultural products as a countermeasure. This Biden administration is quite interesting. Many powerful policies were not introduced until the end of their term, and this policy seems to be customized specifically for China. And China has made a bit of a sign of resistance. As of 2024, Biden's adjustments have reduced tariff coverage for steel and aluminum goods by $10 billion. From 2021 to 2024, the price of U.S. imports will rise by roughly 2% to 3%, which is data from the Federal Reserve, partly attributable to tariffs. At this time, the U.S.'s average annual tariff revenue increased to between $70 billion and $80 billion, continuing the Trump-era trend. Overall, the Biden administration's tariff policy is a continuation of Trump's policy, with only minor changes to the big framework. Okay, let's get to that first. We will continue in the next issue.